Hello students, we've already studied the structure of flower. Now we are going to study the process of fertilization in flowers. Okay, so what is fertilization? Fertilization is the fusion of the male and female nuclei. The male and female nuclei, they combine together and give rise to the zygote, and that process is known as fertilization. Now what is the male gamete in flowering plants? It is the pollen grain, and the female gamete is the ovule. Now we shall study the structure of the pollen grain and the ovule. Okay, now pollen grain is a small round structure which falls on the stigma of another plant or of the same plant by the process of pollination. And when it falls on the stigma of one plant, a flower, then it has got a two nucleus stage. That means we'll just look at the structure of the pollen grain. Just see here, this is figure A. It has got pollen grain. Now this pollen grain has got two layered structure. The outer layer is the exine, which is the rough surface, which is somewhat rough as you can see, and the inner one is intine, which is quite smooth. This is the smooth one, is the intine. Now in the exine there are certain spaces left. These are there's a breakage in the exine. These are known as germ pores. You can see here also what 2, 3 or even more germ pores are present in each pollen grain. These germ pores, what is their function? At the time of this formation of pollen tube, the intine grows from here. So germ pore helps in the development of pollen tube. Now there's a single nucleus in this first diagram. Now let us move on to E. Here you can see there is a tube nucleus being formed. I'll use a different color. There is a tube nucleus being formed, and then another cell has formed out of the main pollen grain, that is the generative cell, and it has also got one nuclei, that is the generative nuclei. Now this is a two-celled stage of the pollen grain, and it is at this two-celled stage it is known as two-celled stage. Okay, and it is at this two-celled stage that this pollen grain is going to fall on the stigma of the flower, and when it will fall there, then it will germinate. Okay, by the process of, it is going to fall there by the process of pollination. Okay, and then it will germinate on receiving, on having the conducive conditions, like proper moisture is there, nourishment is provided to it, suitable temperature is there, then it will germinate and a pollen tube will grow out of the pollen grain through those germ pores. So here you can see there's this tube nucleus in generative nucleus. So this is a two-celled or two nuclei stage. There are two cells and two nuclei. Now let us study something more, like in this D stage. As you can see, when this pollen grain has already fallen onto the stigma, the pollen tube is germinating. The pollen tube has grown out. Okay, so now there's a single, again still at this stage, there's a single generative nucleus and a tube nucleus. Actually the function of the tube nucleus is just, it is the guiding light of the pollen tube. Like it is just guiding the pollen tube through the style. Style is a solid tissue, so it is guiding the pollen tube through the style and into the ovule. Alright, what happens when this pollen tube is growing? This generative nucleus divides into two nuclei. Two nuclei are formed. You can see here, these are the two male cells. So it has divided into two nuclei. So now it is a three-celled stage. Okay, earlier it was two-celled, now it is a three-celled stage. Now but this process is taking place within the style of the female part of the flower, gynoecium. Alright, so we know that pollen is a double layered structure. Outer layer is the exine, inner layer is the intine. Then it has got two celled stage. One is the tube cell, the tube nucleus, and the other is the generative cell containing generative nuclei. It is that two celled stage that this pollen grain falls on the on the stigma, and then it starts germinating as it receives favorable conditions. Now let us study the structure of ovule. Now what is ovule? you've studied the basic structure of flower. This is the stigma, the upper portion, this whole portion is the stigma, then this tube is the style, and the basal swollen part is the ovary. The ovary contains another oval structure which is known as ovule. Now ovule has got certain cells inside it. It has got 7 cells, as you can see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and this entire central thing is 1 cell. So this is known as a 7-celled stage. 3 plus 3 plus 1. 3 plus 3 plus 1. So this is a 7-celled stage, but it has got 8 nuclei. The central cell has got 2 nuclei. Okay, and these are known as the polar nuclei. As you can see here, these are known as the polar. It is already written there, but still I am writing. It is known, these are known as the polar nuclei. These 3 cells which are at the top of the ovule, they are known as the antipodal cells. Okay, these are the antipodal nuclei. The 3 cells at the base of the gametophyte, they are the 2 cells at the periphery of the main egg cell. This is the central cell, egg cell, and the 2 cells at its periphery, they are the synergids. Okay, they are the protective cells, and ultimately they are going to, all of them are going to help in the fertilization and development of embryo by providing nutrition. Now this whole thing, this ovule is a 2-layered structure. It has got 2 layers which are known as integuments. Okay, these covering layers of ovule are known as integuments. Now this whole thing is female gametophyte or the embryo sac. Okay, it has got how many nuclei? 8 nuclei and 7 cells. Now it is at this stage that it is going to be fertilized. Now what happens? The ovule, the pollen tube is entering. This is the microbial through which the pollen tube is going to enter. Now what is fertilization? The fusion of the male nuclei with the female nuclei. Now as a result of favorable conditions, this germinating pollen tube, I'm just going to show it with a different color. Okay, this is the pollen grain, and it has got favorable conditions, so it has germinated. Now this pollen tube is going through the style like this, and it is ultimately entering the ovary through the micropyle. Okay, now what happens after this? As I told you earlier, the tube nucleus, it is only the guiding light of the 2 male nuclei. So as this enters the ovule, the tube nucleus degenerates because it has accomplished its task, its function is over, so it degenerates. Now what happens? This thing degenerates. The 2 male nuclei, one of them combines with this central cell, egg cell. One male nucleus combines with the egg cell, and it forms the zygote. Zygote is being formed. The other male nucleus which was here, it goes and combines with these 2 polar nuclei. Okay, one has combined with this and it has formed the zygote. This one here goes and combines with these 2, as you can see in this diagram, and it forms the endosperm. So this is one fertilization where the egg cell is combining with one of the male cells and result in the formation of zygote. This is first fertilization. Okay, there's one fertilization here. It is done. Now, sorry, I'll write it here. This is the first fertilization. The combination of the male cell, male nuclei with the female egg cell. Okay, this is first fertilization. Now when this male gamete combines with the 2 polar nuclei, this is the second fertilization, which is also taking place in the same ovule. It is the same ovule in which these 2 fertilization are taking place. So this process is known as double fertilization, and the fusion of the 2 polar nuclei with the male nucleus, this process is known as triple fusion, because there are 2 nuclei which are fusing together. to form the endosperm. So this process is known as triple fusion. Ultimate aim of this endosperm is to provide nutrition to the developing embryo. The zygote develops into embryo, and all these cells, they disintegrate to provide nutrition to the developing embryo. Now this is the process of fertilization. Now what happens to the various parts of the flower as a result of fertilization? We'll just see end results of fertilization. What are they? The zygote, which is formed, develops into the embryo. Okay, the zygote develops into the embryo. The ovule develops into the seed, and the ovary, the surrounding container in which everything is taking place, it develops into the fruit. The other parts of the flower like petals, sepals, stamens, style and stigma, they simply dry off and shrivel and fall down. Means they have no further role. They have already done whatever role was assigned to them by nature. Now they are of no use to the plant, so they fall off. Sometimes, but in some plants, sometimes the calyx, that is the sepals, they remain. Calyx means the sepals. They remain persistent and they don't fall off. Means the calyx is persistent. Such things are seen, such a phenomena is seen in tomato, brinjal. You've seen the brinjal, it has got that cap, that is the remaining calyx. The brinjal is like this. It has got these three structures. So this is the calyx. This part is the calyx. This is the calyx, persistent calyx, which remains there on the top of the brinjal. So in tomato also you can see that top, or in some other plants also. So that is known as persistent calyx. Otherwise every other, these petals, sepals, stamen, style, they all shrivel up and they fall down. They are useless to the flower. So this was fertilization. Now in our next video we are going to study about the male reproductive system. That is, we are going to start the reproductive process, reproduction in human beings. And we are going to study about the male reproductive system, then the female reproductive system, and then the fertilization. Okay, so till then, thank you.